Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at A Feast for Crows by George R.R. Martin. And as always, it's great to have you with us.
Always a pleasure to be here, especially to talk about Westeros.
Wow.
After the War of the Five Kings, things are really shaken up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, A Feast for Crows, it's the fourth book in A Song of Ice and Fire, and it's a bit different from the previous books.
Oh, definitely. We're not just jumping into another huge battle right away. Martin really takes his time to show us the aftermath, the political maneuvering, of course, but also, the personal cost of war on everyone.
Right, it's like we're seeing the wreckage up close
Yeah,
and how people are trying to rebuild their lives.
exactly. There's this one character, Septon Marbled, the priest Brienne meets. He's collecting bones, the forgotten victims. And what he says about broken men, it's so powerful. It's like Martin's reminding us that war leaves scars, even on those who survive.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big battles and the power struggles, but A Feast for Crows forces us to look at the smaller stories too, the ones that often get overlooked.
And those smaller stories, they're just as important. They show us the human cost of war, the ripple effects that extend far beyond the battlefield.
Absolutely. And speaking of power, Cersei Lannister is now Queen Regent in King's Landing. You'd think she'd be on top of the world, right?
You would think so, but she seems more isolated and paranoid than ever, surrounded by yes men, pushing away anyone who might challenge her.
That's interesting. It's like she's afraid of her own power, or maybe afraid of losing it.
I think it's a bit of both. Power can be intoxicating, but it can also be incredibly isolating. And the more Cersei tries to cling to it, the more it seems to slip away.
It reminds me of that saying, uneasy lies the head that wears a crown.
Exactly. Cersei's wearing that crown, but she doesn't seem to be enjoying it very much.
Not at all. And then there's Euron Greyjoy making his play for power over in the Iron Islands. He's a completely different kind of leader. Bold, ruthless, almost reveling in the chaos.
Euron's a fascinating character. He's like a force of nature, a storm that's come to disrupt the status quo, and he's not afraid to use any means necessary to achieve his goals.
He and Cersei are like two sides of the same coin, right? Both hungry for power, but with very different approaches.
Exactly. Cersei's driven by fear and paranoia, while Euron seems to thrive on chaos and ambition. It's a fascinating contrast.
And then we have Jaime and Brienne, both on journeys that really dig into those themes of loyalty and redemption.
Right. It's so interesting how Martin has woven those themes into their journeys. Jaime guarding his father's corpse, rejecting Cersei's offer to rule together. It seems like he's wrestling with his past actions, trying to find some kind of meaning, maybe.
Yeah, I get that sense too, like he's haunted by what he's done. And he's trying to figure out who he is now.
And Brienne, she's still so steadfast in her oath to Catelyn Stark. It's incredible, her unwavering loyalty, even in the face of so much adversity.
She's such a strong character,
Mm.
so determined and resilient. But even she has her breaking points. Like that scene where she breaks down in front of the elder brother is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To see her struggling with the weight of her vows.
It shows that even the strongest people have their limits, and that even the most righteous quests can take a heavy toll.
Absolutely. And speaking of struggles, let's move on to the Iron Islands. King Balon Greyjoy's death has set off a whole other kind of power struggle there.
The King's Moot. It's a wild scene. So much chaos and ambition, all these different factions vying for control.
You've got Aaron Damfair, the zealot, with his pronouncements and seawater rituals.
And Victarion, the warrior, relying on his brute strength and reputation.
And then there's Euron. He really shakes things up.
Oh yeah, Euron. He's the wild card in all of this. He's got this charisma, this aura of danger that draws people to him, but he's also incredibly manipulative and ruthless.
And what about Asha Greyjoy? Trying to make her own way in this very male-dominated society.
Asha's a fascinating character. She's smart, capable, and she's not afraid to challenge the status quo, but she's definitely facing an uphill battle.
I admire her for trying, though. It takes a lot of courage to go against the grain like that.
It does, and she's definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so we've got all these different characters and storylines playing out, and it feels like the stakes are higher than ever.
Oh, absolutely. The War of the Five Kings might be over, but the battle for Westeros is far from finished.
And I think what makes A Feast for Crows so compelling is that it's not just about who wins the throne. It's about the human stories, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the search for meaning in a world that's been turned upside down.
I couldn't agree more. Martin really captures the complexities of war and its aftermath, and he forces us to confront some tough questions about power, loyalty, and the nature of humanity itself.
A Feast for Crows is definitely a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It is, and it leaves you wanting more, which is a good thing because we've only just scratched the surface.
That's right. There's so much more to unpack. And we'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into A Feast for Crows.
So we were talking about those themes of power and how differently Cersei and Euron approach it. But, thinking about Cersei, I mean, she's really making a mess of things in King's Landing, isn't she? Yeah, it's kind of amazing how much she's messing up. I mean, you'd think with Tywin gone, she'd step right into that power vacuum. But she's going about it all wrong.
Well, she's always been paranoid, right? But now it seems like it's getting worse. Like she sees enemies everywhere.
And that paranoia, it's driving her to make some really bad decisions. Like that whole thing with the young woman found dead in Tyrion's old cell.
Oh, yeah. She just jumps to conclusions, immediately assumes it's a plot against her, and starts lashing out.
Exactly. Instead of, investigating calmly and strategically, she just reacts out of fear, and it makes her look weak.
It's almost like she wants to create enemies. It's like she needs to feel threatened.
Maybe she does.
Yeah.
Maybe it validates her paranoia, but it's definitely not a sustainable way to rule.
And then there's her rivalry with Marguerite Tyrell. It's like a constant power struggle between them.
It is. And you have to admit, Marguerite's playing the game a lot better than Cersei. She's smart, she's charming, and she knows how to manipulate people.
Yeah, Cersei's attempts to discredit Marguerite, they're just so clumsy and obvious.
Yeah, they are. And they usually backfire, making Cersei look even worse.
And let's not forget about the Faith militants. Cersei thought she could use them for her own purposes.
Right. She thought she could control them, but they're a force of their own. And now they've turned on her.
It's like she unleashed a monster that she can't tame.
Exactly. And now that monster is running rampant in King's Landing.
So while all of this is happening, Jaime is in the Riverlands, trying to clean up the mess from the war.
Yeah, it's a thankless job and a brutal one. He's dealing with the remnants of the rebellion and the lingering hatred from the Red Wedding.
And he's haunted by his past, literally, with Lady Stoneheart leading the Brotherhood without banners.
That encounter, it's so chilling. It's like a manifestation of all the pain and suffering the Lannisters have caused.
It's definitely not something you can just forget or forgive.
Oh, and it raises the question, can Jaime ever truly atone for his sins? Or will he always be haunted by them?
That's a tough question. I mean, he's trying to do the right thing now, but the past has a way of catching up with you.
It does. And it makes you wonder if redemption is even possible.
Meanwhile, Brienne is still on her quest to find Sansa. It's like she's on a completely different journey than everyone else.
She is. It's a more personal journey, I think. More about loyalty and honor than about power and politics.
But it's no less dangerous or challenging.
Definitely. She's traveling through war-torn land, meeting all sorts of shady characters.
And she's constantly underestimated because she's a woman.
Right. People constantly dismiss her, they mock her, they try to take advantage of her.
But she just keeps going. She never gives up.
It's that unwavering determination that makes her such a compelling character.
I think her encounter with Septon Meribald is one of the most memorable in the book.
Oh, absolutely. He's such a kind and gentle soul, and his words about broken men, they really resonate with Brienne.
Yeah, it's like he gives her a new perspective on the war and its aftermath.
He does. And it helps her to see that even in the darkest of times, there's still hope for compassion and forgiveness.
It's a powerful message, and it makes you wonder if Brienne will be able to find that same compassion for herself.
That's a good question, because she's carrying a lot of guilt and self-doubt.
Speaking of guilt and self-doubt, let's check in on Samwell Tarly. He's finally reached the Citadel in Old Town.
Ah, Sam. He's like a fish out of water there, surrounded by all those scholars and ancient texts.
But he seems to be thriving, doesn't he? He loves to learn, and he's finally found a place where his intellect is valued.
It's a good fit for him, and it's a nice contrast to the violence and chaos of the other storylines.
But even in the Citadel, there are hints of darkness. Sam learns about the others, the ancient enemy from the north.
Right. It's a reminder that the real threat to Westeros isn't just human ambition. It's something far more ancient and dangerous.
And Sam, with his love of books and his thirst for knowledge, he might be the key to understanding this threat.
He might. He's already uncovered some valuable information about the others.
So even though he's far away from the political intrigue of King's Landing, Sam's journey could be just as important.
I agree. And I think it speaks to the power of knowledge. That even in the face of overwhelming darkness, knowledge can be a weapon and a source of hope.
Okay, so where we left off, we were talking about how even though the Citadel is this place of learning and knowledge, there are still hints of darkness there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Sam finds out about the others, right?
Mm.
And it's clear that they're a much bigger threat than anyone in King's Landing seems to realize.
Yeah, it's like everyone's so focused on their own power struggles that they're ignoring the real danger.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I love about Martin's writing. He's always reminding us that there are forces at work beyond human comprehension.
Right, like
Yeah.
the others. They're this ancient, mysterious force, and they represent something much bigger than just another war.
Absolutely. And Sam, with his thirst for knowledge, he might be the one to figure out how to stop them.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that the most unassuming character could end up being the most important.
It is. But that's Martin for you. He's always subverting our expectations.
So let's talk about Cersei. I mean, she's really gone off the deep end, hasn't she?
Oh, yeah, her walk of shame. That was something
It
else.
was brutal. And it's hard to feel sorry for her, after all the terrible things she's done.
Right, but it's still a powerful scene. It shows how far she's fallen and how much she's lost.
And it's interesting how her downfall is a result of her own actions.
Hmm.
Her paranoia, her cruelty, her inability to trust anyone.
It's like she created her own prison.
And then there's Jaime, still trying to make amends for his past.
Yeah, his journey is really fascinating. He's trying to be a better man, but it's not easy.
Especially with Lady Stoneheart out there, seeking revenge.
That encounter, it really changes him, doesn't it? It's like he's finally forced to confront the consequences of his actions.
And it makes you wonder if redemption is even possible for someone like him.
It's a tough question. And I don't think Martin gives us an easy answer.
And what about Brienne? She's still out there searching for Sansa.
Yeah, her quest, it's almost like a metaphor for hope. This unwavering belief that things can get better.
But it's a tough journey. She faces so many obstacles and so much danger.
But she never gives up. She's driven by this incredible sense of duty and loyalty.
And I think that's what makes her so inspiring. She's not perfect, she makes mistakes, but she always tries to do the right thing.
And in a world as dark as Westeros, that's a rare quality.
So, A Feast for Crows.
Oh.
It's a complex book, isn't it? With so many different storylines and characters.
It is. And it's a book that really makes you think about the nature of power, about good and evil, about the choices we make.
And leaves you with a lot of questions, too. Like, what's going to happen next? Who's going to survive?
Right. And that's the beauty of it. Martin doesn't give us all the answers. He leaves us wanting more.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. It's been a great discussion.
It has. I always enjoy talking about Martin's work. It's so rich and thought-provoking.
And I think A Feast for Crows, it's a book that deserves to be revisited. There's always something new to discover.
Absolutely. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
So for those of you who haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it.
And for those of you who have, go back and read it again. You might be surprised by what you find.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but we'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of literature. So until then, keep reading, keep exploring, and keep those pages turning.